This week in two different client sessions, I heard two stories that really stuck with me. And they were about the same issue, but from opposite sides of the same problem.
Okay.
So the first one was from a wife who told me, with my friends and with my kids and sometimes even with total strangers, I have no problem feeling empathy and compassion toward people. But when it comes to my husband, I just don't feel it. I don't know why. I don't know what it is, but for some reason I struggle to have empathy in the same way with him.
Ooh,
And
that's tough.
I mean, to be honest, that actually hit home for me because I've been there.
What?
I've been there. I've been there too. There were times
You thought I was a whiner?
No, no, not at all. It wasn't even you. It was just my lack of empathy. It just it didn't work.
Well,
And
I think we're going to find out where that comes from, right?
There were many times, of course, this was early in our relationship when I would slip into that one up position and just like that, like empathy and compassion just flew out the window. And all I felt was contempt and frustration and anger.
Boom, done.
Right. And then in another session, I was with another client and I spoke, it was a wife also, but she was on the opposite side. She was on the receiving end of that lack of empathy. And she told me how hurt she was because she felt like when she was struggling, she was having a bad day, she was sick. She just felt like her husband would do things around the house to help her, but he wouldn't just be with her. Right. And so,
Yeah.
and she said it was just like, she felt like it needed to be something catastrophic for him to be able to even see her. So, and that of course made her feel really lonely and craving that intimacy and connection.
Yes, that's crazy, right? So we have two different relationships, right? Two different people, two different relationships dealing with the same struggle, but like from opposite sides, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Where one who can't feel empathy for a partner and one who desperately needs to feel empathy from their partner. And I think this is much more common than we realize. Most of us want to be in this loving, supporting, understanding relationship, right? And we want to be good partners, but for some reason, empathy may tend to just disappear in our relationship, in our marriage.
Yes. And that is what we are going to be unpacking today.
Oh, good.
Why does this happen? Why do we struggle to feel empathy for the person we claim to love the most? And what can we do about it?
Yeah. So today we're going to break it all down. We're going to break down what empathy actually is because most people misunderstand it, right? Why we struggle with it usually in our closest relationships. And more importantly, how we can start rebuilding our empathy muscle, even if it's been atrophied for a really long time.
Oh, good word.
Yeah. So stick with us. This conversation could change the way you see your partner, your relationship, and yourself. Up next on Master Your Marriage. So before we go any further, let's actually define this word empathy, because I think a lot of people think that they know what it is, right? But they don't always get the full picture. What is empathy?
Good. All right. So a lot of people assume empathy just means understanding what someone else is going through. But that's not exactly it. In fact, when talking about empathy, researchers often look at two parts when they're actually measuring empathy. And there's actually been a good amount of research done on empathy.
Okay.
So they look at two different parts, and you kind of need both parts working to be effective. So the first part is something called perspective taking. And this is the ability to mentally put yourself in someone else's shoes, to be able to see things from their point of view. The second part is, I think, probably the most important part, and that is empathic concern. And this is the emotional piece. It's when you're able to sense what the other person is actually experiencing and feeling.
Yeah.
So
and here's where it gets interesting, right? You can have one without the other.
You can.
Yeah,
Exactly. A person can take perspective, but have zero empathic concern.
Well, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I can see your perspective, but I don't feel.
Right.
And a sociopath, for example, is really good at this. They can read people extremely well, and they can understand your perspective mentally and use that information to manipulate you, but they actually don't feel emotion.
They just don't care about it.
On the other hand, someone can have the empathic concern that they deeply care about people's suffering and they can feel it, but they struggle to really understand someone else's point of view. So you can have one without the other.
I think a lot of people fall into, either of these two categories, and maybe without even really realizing it. So for example, some people get why their partner is upset, but they don't actually feel it. Stays logical. Like, yeah, I can see why you'd be mad about that, but whatever. There's not really a problem here, is there?
There's no
I
emotion.
mean, I understand why you're mad, but I don't get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side, some people really care deeply about their partner, but they just can't see the situation from their partner's perspective.
Yeah. And here's where it ties into our topic today. When we struggle with empathy in our relationship, we're usually lacking one of these two things. Either we're not taking our partner's perspective, or we're lacking the ability to connect with their feelings and their experience, right? So,
yeah, absolutely. So as we move forward, I really want you to ask yourself the following questions. Which one do I struggle with more? Am I someone who understands my partner's experience, but I don't really feel anything about it? Or conversely, am I someone who deeply cares about their struggles, but I find it difficult to see things from their perspective? Right?
Good questions.
Because if we can pinpoint where our breakdown is actually happening, then we can actually address it and do something about it.
Okay. So now that we've defined what empathy is, let's talk about what it isn't. What is it not?
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of people think they're being empathetic, but when they're actually doing something entirely different. Okay. So let's talk about what some of the misconceptions are and what empathy isn't.
All right. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is, and we've addressed this before, is empathy is not sympathy.
A lot of people confuse these two. Sympathy is when you feel bad for someone, but the focus is actually on your own feelings.
Yeah, I feel so bad for them.
Not the other person's feelings.
Yeah, if someone shares that they're struggling, a sympathetic response might be, oh, I'm so sad that you're going through this right now. Note that they said I am, right? That might sound like they're making a connection, but what it really does is put the attention back on me, back on your emotional reaction, instead of staying present with the person who's having that experience.
Exactly. And this is a subtle difference, but it can actually make the other person feel totally different, one versus the other.
Yes.
It can actually even make the other person feel kind of alone, because now instead of being able to just sit in whatever it was that they were feeling for a moment, they might now feel like, oh gosh, now I have to comfort you.
Yeah. Think about someone who's been grieving, for example. One of the hardest things that they experience might be people around them sort of often not knowing how to just be with them, how to sit with them in this experience. So instead, people around them might say things like, oh my gosh, this is just so heartbreaking. And suddenly the grieving person is in a position where they have to say like, no, it's going to be all right. I'm going to be okay. I'll persevere through it, which is not really the position that person who's had this loss should be in.
Exactly. So
they shouldn't try to make the people around them feel better. Honestly, they need to focus on what they're doing for themselves.
And I'm sure I've done that myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't know what to say when somebody has a loss.
Right.
So we're at a loss for words.
Yes. So real empathy means resisting that impulse. It means keeping the focus on the other person rather than ourselves. And so let me demonstrate it. And I think just kind of try it on yourself and see how this feels. And I think you'll get it. I think it'll make a lot more sense when you just feel it. So
okay, go.
Rather than saying, oh, I'm so sad for you, try this instead. That sounds really painful. Tell me more about that.
I like that.
Do you feel the difference?
Yeah. It was that was good, right? Because now I'm like, oh, now you're interested in me.
Yes.
So when you were just talking about being with someone, right? Really being with them, it reminds me of this Brene Brown quote that we really love. And so she says this, show me a woman who can sit with a man in real vulnerability, in deep fear, and be with him in it. And I will show you a woman who has done a lot of work. And show me a man who can sit with a woman in deep struggle and vulnerability and not try to fix it, but just hear her and be with her and hold space for it. And I'll show you a guy who's done a lot of work and a man who doesn't derive his power from controlling and trying to fix everything. It's sort of tough to hear as a guy, right?
Yeah.
Because we're fixers.
Well, I think from both sides, I think that tells us exactly what we tend to do. I think as women, it's tough to sit, if we admit it, with a man in real vulnerability, unless we've worked on our own insecurities, unless we've worked on ourselves. And for men also, like they
tough to not to fix things.
It's tough not to fix things because, again, a lot of your self-worth comes from there.
Yeah.
So again, this comes, I think, a lot back to our self-worth, because how are we deriving that value? can we just forget ourselves for a moment and just be with someone in whatever their experience is?
Yeah. I think probably my favorite and least favorite part about that, because it shines the mirror on me as a guy at the end. She says, without trying to fix things and be controlling. And I'm like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
when I try to fix things, am I trying to be controlling or am I just trying to fix
Be
things?
helpful.
Yeah, I'm trying to be helpful, but defaulting to want to fix things, to want to do instead of sit with. She says it in both both parts of that, where it's sit with the woman, sit with the man.
Yes.
Sit in there.
That's
right.
the
She
key.
doesn't, there's the active word is sit
with,
not do something for.
Yes. Well said. And a very powerful quote that I love. So empathy is not sympathy. Being able to empathize just means being capable of identifying and trying to understand the other person's feelings. Sit with that without experiencing them for yourself or making it about you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So what else is empathy not? Okay. Well, the next one is that empathy is not necessarily agreeing with someone.
Ooh, this one's tough, right? Because this can trip people up. But this is a big one, right? A lot of people think that in order to be empathetic, they have to totally agree with the other person. We have to agree with their emotions, their perspective, but actually you don't.
No.
You don't have to believe that they're right or wrong or justified. You just have to believe that their experience feels very real to them and it's important.
So the next one is that empathy is not giving advice.
Oh, that's so hard for guys.
This kind of goes back to Brene Brown's quote.
Yeah, it really does, right? I think this is where a lot of people get stuck, especially the guys.
Yeah. So when someone is struggling, we feel this urge to fix, like we just talked about. And that often means we are jumping in with solutions. Well, I've got this guy, or I've got this solution, or I know the answer to this. But most of the time, people actually don't need a solution. In fact, shocker, most people actually already know the answer. They already know what they need to do. They just need connection, and they just need to feel seen.
Right. And I'm sitting here being defensive as a guy going like, okay, well, when, in a past role, I was CEO, and the only thing I did was provide answers and solutions for people. That was like my main job.
Yeah.
Right. People come to me, I have this problem. Here's a solution. Or tell me what you think. Yes, that's a great solution. So it was all about just problem solving. So I think that, especially if that is your job, if your job is problem solving, it's so much easier to just start into problem solving. And absolutely. I think it's a shortcut for us to sort of not have to dig into empathy.
Well, and that's a great question to ask yourself. You have to kind of sit with that and go, am I just avoiding the feelings so that we can move on?
And can I just move on? Because it looks like there's some tenderness here that I don't want to do that, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So honestly, a really good rule of thumb is if somebody wants advice, they'll probably ask for it.
Yeah.
Right. If they haven't asked, they probably just need you to sit with them so that they can be heard.
Yes.
Sometimes I'll clarify this with Charla. And I love this. We did this in the car the other day. She was talking to me and my brain was like just rolling through solutions. And I said, okay, hang on. Is there anything you need me to do about this, or you just want me to listen? And she's like, I just need you to listen. I'm like, oh, that's so great. Like, honestly, you think about what I want you to do is I want you to think about this as a guy. Like, think about the relief that you have if you just have to listen.
Right.
Right.
Takes the pressure off.
Yeah, on Instagram, there's a bunch of reels, and you can search for it's either the 3 H's or the 4 H's. I'm not going to mention the 4th H, but sometimes it's you need to be helped, you need to be held, you need to be heard.
Oh, I know the 4th one.
Yeah, what's the 4th one?
Humped.
Humped. Yeah. So honestly, I think that's really what it is. You have to ask yourself that question: is there something I need to help you with? Yeah. Do I need to hold you, or just need to hear you? Empathy is that H where it just means I need to hear you.
Yes. Awesome. So another one is empathy is not saying, I understand.
Ooh.
Oh, that's tricky.
Can I just get past it and just say, I understand?
That sounds like a cheat code.
It is a cheat code.
It doesn't work very well.
No, it doesn't. Because the truth is, no matter how good you are at perspective taking, you will never really fully understand another person's complete experience. So I can say, oh, I see it from your point of view, but I have not lived in your shoes, right? You haven't lived their life. You haven't had their experiences or even felt the things that they feel or understand why they do things.
Actually, when you say, I understand, I understand, feels dismissive a little bit, doesn't it? Like, try it on. I understand. It actually kind of shuts down.
I understand how you feel. Like,
do you though?
Really?
It kind of shuts the conversation down and creates a a wall, a disconnection. That leads us to, I think, maybe a more surprising one that empathy is not, which is it's not really about talking that much, is it?
Ooh, this one's hard.
We think we have to fill in all those gaps and all those spaces, but the empathy isn't about the words we say. What's that about?
I want to go back to Brene Brown again, right? So this one may surprise people about the not talking, because when we think about empathy, we want to, we all get a little stressed out about like what to say or how to validate, but if you just sit with, if you sit in, Brene Brown also likes to say this thing. She says, the beauty of being in she's a mental health professional. The beauty of being a mental health professional is I can just sit in discomfort longer than you can. I can sit in the silence longer.
Yeah.
But so you think about that, I don't have to say anything. Right? Real empathy is not about the words. It's about your presence. It's about your attunement.
Yes.
Right? It's about the nonverbal communication.
So think about times in your life when you've really felt understood. It probably wasn't because someone said the perfect thing. They had the perfect words. It was because they were just fully there with you. And honestly, when you think about this, it kind of takes the pressure off because you don't have to be eloquent. You don't have to have beautiful words. You don't have to think of the perfect response. You just want to be with someone.
Right. Honestly, you can feel more empathy with eye contact than giving some sort of a 5-minute thing that you've prepared, right?
Yes.
In fact, what you really want to think about is your body language. Right?
Yes.
Are you demonstrating openness? Can you put your phone down?
Yes.
Right? Put that thing away. Can you make eye contact? Can you nod? Maybe lean in.
Yes.
Try to tune into their feeling and see if you can just experience what they're experiencing. Just be there, right? That alone, just those things alone will be powerful. And we're going to give you a few tips in a minute about what you can say, but words themselves are not empathy. The attunement or the just being with them. That's what empathy is.
One last one before we talk about how to actually do empathy.
Ooh.
Empathy is also not correcting someone.
Oh, so I just cringed a little bit.
Yeah, I know. Let's say your spouse comes to you and they're like, "Hey, I'm really upset with you. You know what? I'm pissed actually. You had no right to do that thing that you did." Okay. Automatically, it's a very natural thing to want to quickly, maybe they misunderstood me and I want to correct their interpretation of that situation of what I said or what I did.
Dial in the situation.
And it can be really tempting to get maybe even defensive or jump in and state your facts, state your position. But we need to try to always connect before we correct. Connect before correct.
Ooh.
That's a really great motto. And
the reason why this is so important is because it builds trust. It's conveying to your partner that they can share with you whatever's going on inside of them and, and around them, and that you'll value their input and you value what's important to them before you jump in and try to modify or correct the interpretation.
And this is huge when our partner can trust that connection comes first. It has a massive impact on relationships.
I love that the connection comes first.
It does. And and it doesn't mean that after you've established that empathy and that connection that we can't still make a correction and explain our perspective if needed. It just means that the empathic connection is valued more than the correction.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Okay. So we've talked about what empathy is not. Now let's actually get into how to do it.
Ooh, how to do empathy.
Yeah. There's 3 key things to remember. 3, 1, 2, 3. We're going to go through them.
Okay.
When practicing empathy. And honestly, I would say the first one is the hardest, but let's first say what they are and then we'll go through and explain them. The first one is, number 1 is being present.
Sit in.
Ooh. 2 is focusing on the now. We'll explain that in a second. Yep. And the 3rd is focusing on the feelings and the needs. So let's start with first being present. And this one is deceptively simple, but maybe not so easy to do. Right?
Challengingly difficult.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Because real presence requires us to stop, to pause. Means we stop thinking about what we want to say. That's it. Just stop strategizing what our next response is and just sit in with the other person. And that's a little bit uncomfortable for us, right? Our brains have a lot of things they want to do. We're looking for something to fix, something to solve, something to even just fill the silence with, right?
Yes.
But instead, when we're truly present, we're not trying to move the conversation anywhere. I would say it's more like we're just trying to be a rock and we're trying to let the river flow around us.
Mm.
Let their emotions just flow around us and just absorb that.
That's a cool visual,
Yeah.
actually. So Martin Buber, he is an Israeli philosopher and psychotherapist. He says that presence is the most powerful gift that a person can give to another.
Yeah, I think
love
so.
that.
Yeah.
But it's not an easy thing to give this presence to other people, because he goes on to say that it requires bringing nothing from the past into the present.
Ooh.
And that's really hard to do, because our brains love to make these connections, right? We're always unconsciously, we're always making connections to things, and especially to things from the past. And so as someone's talking, our thoughts will drift to old experiences. But the moment we start to drift away and we start to make connections or to think about outside things, we will lose that ability to be present with the other person, which is this gift that we can give them.
I think about that as we talk still just about being present. Like, how would you plan that? If you knew you had to sit with somebody, maybe somebody who had a loss, like, could you suspend everything and just go and be present without trying to plan what you'd want to say or what you'd want to do or the gift you want to make or the dinner you want to bring?
It's rough. I think it's very hard for me to do. It's hard for me because I want to help. I want to do the right thing. And I think that we think so much about doing the right thing that we miss out on what someone is saying in the moment.
Yeah. And I think the gift that you can bring that is more important than anything else is the gift of your presence.
Exactly.
Absolutely. All right. This leads us to our second point, which is focusing on the now, right? When someone is hurting, they don't really need us to analyze the past, point out the mistakes that they might have made that have led them to this point, right? Map out a 5-step plan for the future. They don't need any of that. They just need us to sit in and feel what they're feeling right now.
And you know what makes this especially tricky is that even as a person is sharing something, they oftentimes will bring in their own stuff from the past. As they're talking about something that's frustrating them right now, they might start telling you a story about how mad they are about a friend. And then they start to talk about all the other things that this friend has done in the past. And so now they're talking about the past. But they're probably telling you this story to make an empathic connection. But what they don't realize is that as they're talking about the past, it actually makes it harder for you as the listener to attune to what is in the now, in the present. So
absolutely,
what you want to do in that type of situation is to, again, just really try to tune into what they're feeling now and not get wrapped up in the story of the past. Just what are they feeling now as a result of the things that happened in the past? What is the emotion now?
Absolutely. And that brings us on to the third piece, which is focusing on their feelings and their needs. Just focus on what they're feeling and what do they need from me in this moment. Not what did I plan to give them in this moment, but what do they need from me in this moment?
And so I think about this, and I think of times when this can be especially difficult. For example, maybe the thing that they shared with me, maybe Robert, maybe you came to me and you told me something about me that was difficult for me to hear. Maybe it felt a little bit like a criticism. Okay. Try really hard to stop yourself from getting defensive and just try to hear the feelings and the needs that are beneath the criticism.
It's so hard.
Right? Because, and we've said this on previous episodes, judgments and criticisms, even though they're not an effective form of communication, and we know we try to avoid those and find better ways to communicate, they really are just an expression of an unmet need.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's some empathy. Well, there's not empathy, but there's some feelings behind that they're trying to express.
Feelings and needs. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. This is the point where you may choose to ask one of my favorite questions.
Okay. Tell me.
What are your concerns? Or help me understand.
I love that one.
And I like the help me understand because it's not admitting defeat or like, oh, well, I'm not too smart to understand what you're saying to me. It's asking clarifying questions to say, like, I'm really interested in what you're saying. I don't think I have a full grasp of it. So help me understand more. Like, I think that's more important than just like, I don't get what you're trying to tell me.
Just what are your concerns? Help me understand.
2 favorite things?
Yeah.
I thought you look hot was one of your favorite things.
Okay. I like that one too.
Okay.
All right. And so this is what makes empathy honestly active, not passive.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just sitting there and nodding like, oh gosh, when is she going to be done? Is she almost done? Is she over this? Nod, 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 right?
Right.
Are they going to get this out of their system sooner or later? It's tuning in, it's responding with body language, and it's connecting with what's happening inside of them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about what empathy is, what it isn't. We've talked about how we do it, but here's an important question. How do you know when you actually have it?
Ooh,
How do you know?
that's a good question.
How do you know when you're in empathy with someone?
Or when you're feeling it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say because it feels different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Empathy isn't just this mental exercise like today, I'm going to do empathy for 3 minutes.
Right.
Right. It's really something that you experience. It's something inside of you. You might relax a little bit, right? Your defenses are lower. You actually find you'll have less judgment.
Yes.
Like I don't judge you for that, but I understand this sucks and how can I help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So it actually, and another thing I'll add to what Robert just said is that empathy feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good.
Maybe that's the point, right?
Yeah.
If you get to the point where you're finding peace, then maybe you're there.
I think that's a really good measure.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the ironic part. Sometimes people resist empathy because they think it's going to drain them. It's going to be too much. Oh my gosh, it's emotional. It's dramatic. But real empathy actually creates connection, and connection feels good. And that's how you know that you have it. Yeah. So let's go back to the stories that we shared at the beginning. Remember the couple that both from each side expressed a lack of empathy in their marriage. Why did this happen to them? If empathy is so important and it actually feels good, then why is it that we struggle to empathize with the person that we profess to love the most?
Our most important relationship, right?
Yeah.
Such a good question. Well, I think there's probably a couple of reasons for that. And the biggest one might be being in the one-up position.
Yes.
Yeah. And when we're in the one-up position, we're in a state of grandiosity where we see ourselves as better than our partner. And this being in the one-up position really makes us incapable of empathy, right? We can't step into their experience because at some level we believe that their experience is just not worthy of our attention. And we did a whole episode on grandiosity a couple weeks ago. So that's a really good one to go back and revisit, right? Because it's surprisingly prevalent in relationships. And most people don't realize that they're even doing it. They don't realize that they're one up. But if you feel like you can't even come close to empathizing or understanding your partner's position or experience, you might be in a one-up position.
Yeah. Seeing your partner as an equal is absolutely necessary for empathy.
Yeah.
You have to see them same as, equally valuable, equally worthy. If you're in any mindset where you see yourself as superior or better than, you're one up, whether it's because you think that you're more rational, you're more mature, or you're just right, you won't be able to access empathy. It just won't be there. And that's a recipe for disaster. And there's one more big reason I think that empathy breaks down in these relationships. And it's something called negative sentiment override.
Ooh, yeah. We've talked about that before. That's a really, this comes from Dr. John Gottman's work. But, so negative sentiment override happens when a couple has just mismanaged and or avoided conflict for so long that they start seeing each other through this lens of, you just can't do anything right.
Yeah.
Call it just negatively tinted lens, right? When they come in my favorite one is, your husband comes in, he's late from work, but he comes in the door and you're just on him immediately. Like, you're late, you're never on time. I need to do these things. And he's got the 2 gallons of milk in a bag that you asked him to pick up and some flowers. Right. He's such a, he did so many things wrong, but he did the things that you wanted, but you can't see that. You're only you're looking at that one thing. And then, so you can't even see when they do something positive. You just interpret pretty much every one of the things that they do with the worst possible lens, right? You see them as just always a screw up or less than. Again, it's part of grandiosity, right? And your empathy just disappears.
So if you've been struggling to feel empathy for your partner, ask yourself a couple questions.
Yeah.
Am I seeing them as an equal, or am I in a one-up position? Number 2, am I stuck in this negative sentiment override? Have I been holding on to resentment or unresolved conflict that's making it hard for me to see them truthfully? Okay. If so, that's probably going to be a good place to start.
Yeah. If you're stuck, especially if you're stuck in negative sentiment override, our last 2 or 3 episodes on forgiveness
and
trust are really going to be important for you as well.
Yeah.
So let's bring this all together. Empathy is necessary for intimacy and connection in all relationships. It's what really allows us to truly see and understand our partner. I love this, see our partner, right? Not on a surface level, but on a really deep and emotional level where we can connect. And when empathy is lost, it's usually because we've slipped into this one-up position or we're stuck in negative sentiment override. Good news is the muscle empathy, even though it has atrophied, we can bring it back. We can strengthen it, right? And if you feel like you've not been able to access your empathy muscle for a while, that doesn't mean it's gone. It just needs to start being exercised again.
Yeah. And
start working it again.
And that's going to be our challenge for you this week. Just start somewhere, right? Try being an emotion detective this week. See if you can just go out and pay attention to what's going on inside of the people around you. And if you really want to grow, practice this. And this is especially challenging, but if you want to grow, try it. You try to do empathy on the person that you judge the hardest.
Ooh.
Find that person at work, at church, your friend circle, the one that you judge the hardest, and just see if you can see more of their humanity. Can you practice empathy? Can you imagine what life might actually feel like from their perspective?
Boy. And as a reminder, you don't really have to be perfect at this. You just have to try, right? Try to attune to someone else and what their feelings are and what their needs are. Try to be with them in that experience, because even a small step towards empathy can make a huge difference in your relationship. Absolutely.
And in the world.
Yeah.
All right. So that is it for today. If you found this episode helpful, would you please share it with a friend or with your partner, or maybe even listen to it with your partner and have a conversation about it? Also, we really appreciate your comments, your 5-star reviews. You would be amazed how much those help us out.
As always, be kind to each other this week. Put each other first. It's the small things done often that make the biggest impact.